All right, going to talk about week 5. We're a quarter of the way through the season, basically, without counting playoffs. So the data's starting to look kind of legitimate, I think. Of course, lots going to change when we change our dynamics of our teams. We buy and we sell. But we're no longer in the sample size is just so small that we really can't even make real conclusions, I feel like. I like to split the season into thirds because we're a 21-week season, so it's very easy just to say first 7 weeks, middle 7 weeks, last 7 weeks. So I've always called that T1, T2, and T3, which is like the third 1, third 2, and third 3. So, we always kind of record and keep a copy of what is your numbers for the first 7, middle 7, last 7. So we're getting pretty close to that. So I think these VTL numbers are starting to really be more meaningful. Maybe we can make stronger conclusions based on what we've seen. That said, still pretty hard. We're a really tightly bunched league still, and so power rankings are just always going to be a little bit tough until we have a lot of time and we've really, we know exactly who we all are. So anyways, let's start by looking at the actual results from this last week. We had JW and I. It really was a close matchup for a lot of the week, and I barely beat him in several offensive categories, but I did end up beating him badly, 12-4, and the VTLs really slipped for him at the end of the week. Frank beats Bo. Doesn't look like either of their offenses were great. I'll stick more to the VTL analysis in a minute. Brad beats Jeremiah. That means Jeremiah is 0 for 5. He has lost all 5 weeks. The only team in the league to not get a win yet, I believe. Corey, big bounce back from a couple losses in a row, I believe. Beats Alex, who's fresh off of 2 really good weeks in a row, beating Nate and beating me. Big battle between Casey and Matthew, 2 teams who are looking like they're on the right side of the playoff race. And it was very tight. I mean, look at the offense. Tied in home runs, walks, and steals. One off in runs. Average separated by 3 points. Slugging separated by 9 points. Tied in saves. Very close. Really cool to see a matchup that close. 4 categories tied. Pretty crazy. You don't see 7, 5, and 3 very much, if we've ever seen it. Wouldn't be surprised if we had not ever seen that before. And Nate bouncing back from a couple down weeks with a very, very, very strong week, best in the league, and not surprisingly, he was able to pick up a pretty big win over French. So if we look at the standings, Frank sits at the top, but he's chased right behind by Nate. Maffey is behind him after getting a little bit of a win over Casey, and I am wedged between. Bo is still technically in the playoff field despite really struggling so far this season. He had 1 really good week, but the other 4 weeks have all been a little bit below average to well below average. So a lot of luck according to the stats, a lot of the VTL stats, that is. A lot of luck for Bo to be still hanging around, but that's a great place to be because as we know, 7th place gets Otani. Unless you want to pick somebody else. Then Alex, Brad, Corey, right next to each other in the standings. French and Jeremiah right next to each other in the standings. And then JW bringing up the rear after a pretty big loss. So we look at the VTL numbers. Nate bounced back. I think maybe he was down to 56 or something after week 4. But he had a really strong week this week. And we'll look at the week-specific numbers here in a second. Frank really dived way down from 60% to 55%. So he actually went from first, a pretty clear first, to, 1.5% behind me. And I'm 2% behind Nate. So not a good week for Frank, though he was still able to win pretty big. Casey and Maffey both essentially right there, tied with each other. As we saw in that matchup, it was extremely close. So that's kind of cool. They are the clear 4th and 5th right now, 4% better than our next team, which is Brad, who hasn't necessarily had a great year. It doesn't feel like the pitching has been really bad, and that's where you almost assumed he would be strong because he has some aces. But as Brad put into the chat yesterday, a lot of people, on the injured list, and a lot of usable people. So Tommy Edman, Tyler O'Neill, Lane Thomas, Josh Lowe, Giancarlo Stanton, Cutter Crawford, Tyler Glasnow, Sean Manaea, Justin Martinez. Only a couple of those guys are really good players, but that's a lot of usable pieces, and so you could certainly hope for a little more health luck. Maybe that team can bounce back a bit once that all comes back. 54% on offense, though, not too shabby. That's fifth best, and I frankly didn't. No, actually, now that I think about it, coming out of the draft, I think we all thought Brad had a pretty good offense. Anyways, we see Nate kind of at the top, me a little bit behind, Frank a little bit behind, Casey and Matthew grouped together, but then there's a big drop, and from there, everyone's relatively tight. Brad, Alex, Jeremiah, Corey are separated by less than 2%. French, JW, Bo separated by basically 2%. So still anything can happen from 6 to 12. Any of this could flip-flop pretty much in one given week, as we saw. Frank lost about 5% VTL this week. Nate gained about 5% VTL this week. All it really takes is one dominant performance, and any of these guys could jump up to the 6th spot. There does appear to be a little bit of separation, though, between the top 5 and the rest of the league. And then looking more specifically at some of the trends of batting versus pitching, Nate is really good at both, second at both. Just looks like he'll be able to cruise to a bye to me. But then those last 2 weeks before this week were a little concerning, but I think Nate's all good. I think between myself and Frank, we're gonna be battling for that second bye, and maybe Casey and Maffey, maybe one of the other teams even this early in the season has something to say about that. But we are far less strong in our profiles, right? Being second in both sides of the ball, that portends to a lot of success in the future. With me being 7th in batting, 1st in pitching, but my pitching has really started to dip. The last couple weeks have actually not been particularly good. Makes me a little more of a volatile profile. And then Frank not being top 3 on either side of the ball yet, though I think he was last week, definitely doesn't feel as dominant either. Casey is actually 6th and 7th, so also doesn't feel like a team that's going to run the table to me right now, but there's nothing to complain about being 53% on both sides of the ball this early in the season. I think for a lot of teams in the middle here, starting kind of from Casey down, it's really more about, can you be good enough that you feel confident you can make the playoffs? And if you think you can make the playoffs at that point, I think a lot of teams would say, well, I'm going to buy in and give myself a shot, right? Because making the playoffs is not a given. It's a pretty competitive league at this point. But if Casey, if Maffey, if they can hang around that 53% for long enough, starts to look like week 12, week 13, week 14, they're like, I think I'm a playoff team. That's maybe when you pounce in July, you buy. So as long as you can hold steady there for a while, that's what gives you that confidence to go for it. And with Casey, he's already going for it a little bit, which is really cool. He's made some moves to try to supplement and go for it now. It's playoffs or bust. Maffey, it'll be interesting to see whether he decides to make some moves or not. Traditionally a pretty conservative manager and has a lot of young guys that he might want to just let them develop and not trade them away before they reach their ceiling. We will see. Brad is another hugely interesting one to me, because I think Brad said he wanted to buy this year. I think he said this was the year. I know he was mulling over the offer for Soderstrom plus Holiday, and I guess that didn't end up happening. But whether Brad wants to buy in, he is 5th in batting, 10th in pitching. But again, I think there's reason to be optimistic that pitching should improve. Like I said at the beginning, though, we have 5 weeks of data, so there's injuries. Tyler Glasnow is a big piece of his rotation, but he has not been hurt the whole season. So 41% pitching VTL, that's pretty tough. But if Brad wants to buy in, why not? Why couldn't it be Brad? Same thing for Alex and Jeremiah. if they wanted to buy in. They're both really good on one side of the ball. Same with Corey, same with French. This is such a weird checkerboard between Alex, Jeremiah, Corey, and French. They're really good on one side, very bad on another, all four teams. Um, so that's quite interesting. And any of them, if they could just supplement their weakness and stop being so bad, they would have a pretty good chance to really bounce up the ratings, the VTL ratings, that is. Probably bounce up the power rankings as well. Anyway, we spent a lot of time on that. Let's look at the luck index. So I actually realized I hadn't updated this for last week. So this is 2 weeks now that we've incorporated into one update. So a couple big changes. I think French was pretty lucky first 3 weeks. That's not really the case anymore. He's dead even at 50%. Jeremiah has just continued to be extremely unlucky. So what is his VTL? To be 47.5% total VTL and to have not won a game is really weird. I mean, that's literally, he's won almost 50% against the entire league, and yet not one of those 5 weeks did he find himself winning more categories than his opponent. Pretty unlucky. Don't see any reason to think that Jeremiah is going to fail all year. It just looks like he's had really bad luck. JW, offensively, he's run up against a couple really strong offensive performances. Of course, his offense has not been particularly good, so it's been a pretty bad recipe there. No one else really is like particularly tough schedules. Bo and Frank are the two who have just had crazy good luck. For Bo to be 31% opposing pitching VTL 5 weeks into the season, I would have said that's borderline not possible. 5 weeks in a row to get that bad of a performance against you every week, that's wild. He must have caught Jeremiah on that like record low. Anyways, look over here at some of these individual numbers for this last week. So Nate had a really strong week. He had the 76th best week all time, the 36th best week batting. Corey with a really strong week pitching, 117th. That's out of 1,500 results. So it's a 92nd percentile result. Same with me batting. Tough for JW. Frank the other week, and now me. 113th best week batting. And Alex kind of out of nowhere with a total dud on offense because the last 2 weeks have been pretty strong. I was feeling like, okay, yeah, he's back, just like I expected. And this week, pitching was good. 66th percentile is nothing to scoff at, but 2.52%. That is 1,468th best out of 1,506 results. So, big step back. JW, Bo, and Alex each with really tough weeks. And yeah, Frank as well, the pitching, which has been very solid. I think it was second best in the league coming into this week. Really, really bad week there. So, interesting week. I do have power rankings. I did them last night. I don't even remember what I set them as, so don't freak out. I have tier A. This is the first week, I think, maybe, where I've put it to the three of us. Nate, Frank, and myself. We don't really feel like... I think Nate is the top team, but we've each had a couple low points across the 5 weeks. I've actually had the best, worst week. So my floor has been the highest of the three at this point, although the ceiling of Nate and Frank has been a little higher. Nate's been the best team 3 weeks. So, yeah, the three of us, I feel like, are the two teams kind of competing for a bye at this point. Certainly a lot of season left. That could definitely change. But right now, it feels more like we're a group of three at the top to me than it does Frank or Nate deserve to be by themselves at the top. Early playoff favorites, Maffey and Casey, have separated themselves by VTL. They're up top 5 in record as well. Feels natural to have them there. They've both shown that with Casey, it's more been that there hasn't really been a down week. He just barely lost, and that was his first loss. Maffey has technically not lost all year, though he did tie once. But no losses in 5 weeks. 1 loss in 4 weeks for Casey. So they're technically I think their wins have not been as big, but their losses are very very few. So those two teams feel like the right spots for 4 or 5. This tier C is the ceiling is very high, still very high. Jeremiah and Alex both, I think, have the potential to still be very dangerous teams and knock teams out of the playoffs potentially if they can just address their massive shortcomings in their respective areas. For Jeremiah, that's pitching. For Alex, it's hitting. On the bubble, it's Brad, Corey, and French. The three of them are separated by razor's edge. All three are good at one thing and bad at another thing, but just not quite to the extent that I feel Alex and Jeremiah could reach. And then Tier E, rough start. JW and Bo are both at the bottom by VTL. At the bottom, JW's at the bottom by standings, and Bo, like I said, the luck index has been wildly. He's been wildly lucky per VTL to be in 6th place right now. I just don't. It doesn't look legitimate to me. So I feel like those two teams are probably going to have the toughest time from this point in the season to claw back and try to win the title. So that's where we are as of week 5. I guess this video got a little bit long. I really got more into the weeds on the specifics of offensive and pitching VTLs. But this week we have a few big matchups. So Nate and Casey, battle of 2 projected playoff teams, Justin and Maffey, and Frank and Brad. So the top 6 teams, I think, by VTL are all playing each other. Neat. That means we're going to have some of the bottom teams matching up as well. So, time for the cream to start rising to the top a little bit. It'll be very interesting to see how the standings are shaken up after we have like similar tier teams playing each other kind of across the board. All right. I guess I can't produce any more ChatGPT thumbnails because the stupid system takes like a week to create an image now. I guess it's ruined. So if you have any image generation things, send them my way, or else we're just gonna have boring thumbnails from here on out. But all right, that's week 5. Last 2 weeks I have thought I was going to write recaps, and I haven't. Life's a little bit busy. These videos are really fun and easy, and they're already talking a lot about what I'd be saying, so my motivation to do those has dropped maybe a tad. I'd like to actually get someone on this video with me, maybe next time. I'm usually doing these during the workday on Monday. I'm out today, but it's not necessarily easy to coordinate, but I'll try because I think it'd be more fun to have other people's opinions in here too. But yeah, I'll try to keep the next one shorter.